has been on absolute fire, has been able to do it yet again, and they do it with a hot 3-0, and you know, some of those games even a little bit quicker than we thought they were actually going to be. So now jumping into the next one, we're going to find out who they will play against to try to get back into the good graces of the grand final, and who gets to go to the grand final for sure. Zico, you got a favorite in this one?
The Pumpers, I think, would be my favorite. ABC, they have been looking like they are on the rise, but when it comes down to it, I think this meta really is good for people who play Cleaves. We know Cervantes is a phenomenal DK. We know Nerd Rage on that Warrior is going to be able to do very, very big damage like we saw earlier already. So I think the Pumpers, they're looking very good to take this one and potentially make it to the finals in their first broadcast appearance. So
we have two teams that we were kind of saying seem to be right on the edge, right? We have ABC. This is the team that's consistently getting into very decent placing, but not exactly where they want to be, not necessarily taking down those top teams. We said the same thing about Change My Mind. ABC, do you feel like they are in a slump?
Well, they actually beat Wildcard Gaming. I mean, they're the ones that sent Wildcard Gaming down to the lower bracket to lose to Method Black. So, I mean, if ABC, this is a tournament where ABC could potentially make it to the finals and make that deep run. I think this is that tournament. It seems like they're here to play. They brought some new compositions that they seem phenomenal at. I'm just really curious to see if they have anything prepared for the Pumpers, because I think this will be their most difficult matchup yet. And I have to agree with Zico. I feel like Death Knight compositions right now in this meta are supreme. And if you don't have a Death Knight, you need to figure out something that beats it, and I don't know what that is.
So ABC trying to break some of the results that they had this year by this tournament, but when we look at the Pumpers, this is kind of a disruptive team that we haven't seen very much of, and now they can do just that. They can slow down the momentum that ABC did get. We already know that the Pumpers, if you're favoring them composition-wise, they were already able to beat Method Black in this tournament. That's the reason Method Black is in the lower portion of the bracket. We're going to see Nerd Rage paired up with Cervantes here for the Cleave.
All right, I'm curious to see how it goes head-to-head. I mean, this is a similar matchup we saw with the Pumpers earlier against Change My Mind. They wanted this Death Knight Warrior into the Rogue Mage, and then when we saw that team change to a Wizard Cleave composition, Fnobbers, the new member for the Pumpers, formerly on the Chalky Milkmen, is playing that Balance Druid Death Knight to try and dampen the Wizards. So the Pumpers have a good answer for Rogue Mage and general play with this Warrior Death Knight. Then they can counter-comp the Wizard Cleaves by bringing in Fnobbers on Moonkin, and that's going to be their game plan, and I definitely think they won the blind pick. I'm curious to see how ABC can overcome this disadvantage.
Yeah, right away the Pumpers looking to get aggressive. Drainer immediately using the Way of the Crane and his Trinket to get out of blind, retreating back to the pillar once again, taking full advantage of Alec's Frozen Orb. And this is one thing we see really good Mistweavers do, is when a Frost Mage drops down some of that AoE, a Blizzard, or a Frozen Orb, the Mistweaver Monk, he's susceptible to Polymorph, so he just runs inside of it so he can get the heals out he needs, potentially look for that Way of the Crane. That way Alec doesn't really have an opportunity to land those Polymorphs, as it will break to that AoE damage.
Yeah, definitely will. Nixie, wondering if he's playing the Flying Daggers build. He's been using Fan of Knives periodically, trying to just spread poisons maybe onto multiple targets to build up his energy regeneration and also have some healing reduction onto multiple members. The Warrior is definitely the weak link here in the matchup against ABC. Warrior not bringing any sort of self-healing mechanics, so any damage they do to him will stick, and he will have to wait for Drainer to get out of crowd control to stabilize them, which is why we don't see ABC attacking the Death Knight. Attacking the Mistweaver Monk can be a viable option, but because of how much max health players have in the current patch, it's a little bit unlikely that you actually kill a healer in a swap, and as Rogue Mage, if you don't kill the target in a stun when it's a healer, you're probably not going to kill it. So it just makes more sense for ABC before dampening to just attack the Warrior, control the Death Knight, control the Mistweaver, try and burst down the Warrior as much as you can, maybe deeper into dampening, switch to the Death Knight when that Death Strike is less potent, as the Death Knight can't escape to safety, which is one advantage the Warrior brings, is mobility. He can use Heroic Leap to jump to safety, and typically Arms Warriors use that Heroic Leap defensively. They don't like jumping into the fight with it. They'll save it to then retreat back to the pillar when their healer is crowd controlled, and that's what I'm really looking to see here from Nerd Rage, is when Drainer is crowd controlled, how does he respond? How is he able to avoid the damage and stay alive himself?
I'm always interested to see what builds these mages are playing. Alec is actually running an interesting one, similar to what we saw yesterday. He's playing basically a tank mage, where he actually picked up the PvP honor talent, Nether Wind Armor, which reduces the chance he gets struck or gets critically struck by 15%. Makes you very durable. I really feel like it's an underrated talent, so I like to see him implementing that. But Nixie getting swapped to, getting bursted down, almost an execute range. Shadow steps away to Asgaroth, should be able to survive. But yeah, Alec with that tanky honor talent as well, playing Lonely Winter, and something we basically never see, Chain Reaction, which increases your Ice Lance damage against frozen target by 3%, stacking up to 5 times. So he's really just focusing on Ice Lance damage, instant cast damage, as he knows with a Warrior on him, with the Death Knight on him, it's unlikely he's going to be getting off these Frostbolts. And I actually think it's a smart adaptation. I think a lot of the time these mages, they're relying too much on Frostbolt, and it's just so unlikely to get that off with the Death Knight on you, who's just marching on you and sitting on top of you the entire game.
With the Flying Daggers build that Nixie is running, and then the Ice Lance build that Alec is playing, it makes me think that Drainer is actually going to be their kill target and main objective. This way, when they switch to Drainer, stun him and hold him in place, an Arms Warrior and Death Knight have to be close to the targets they're attacking, so they'll be close to Drainer, and then when the 3 members are stacked up, Flying Daggers will hit 3 players, Frozen Orb will hit 3 players, and then in dampening, they can maybe try and overwhelm Drainer. That seems to be the only thing that makes a lot of sense to me. Of course, the Ice Lance build just is an easier time as a mage when you've got multiple melee constantly harassing you, so maybe that's just standard for the mage now in these melee cleave matchups when you know you're going to be the target. But Nixie running that Flying Daggers is a bit interesting, as he's not actually running any Azerite traits for it either, just the honor talent, so just a little bit of an added bonus. And they are constantly switching to Drainer and trying to burst him down in a stun. Later on in the match, I mean, that was already a close call with only Vendetta committed from Nixie. I almost wonder if Alec had pulled the trigger on Icy Veins, if they had been able to just kill Drainer right there. This strategy could work for ABC.
Yeah, definitely potential there, as long as Alec can hold on to some of those fingers of Frost procs, and he has all his instant cast damage ready with the Frozen Orb as well as the Blizzard, as he is playing the Freezing Rain honor talent. So anytime he gets the Frozen Orb down, he can get a free Blizzard. Just a lot of instant cast damage. So far, Asgroth's been doing a pretty good job on mana. What I want to continue to see the Pumpers do is make these swaps onto Nixie. He's already trinketed, he has evasion, but still vulnerable as a target. If he gets caught into a Stormbolt, definitely take him down. Alec now getting a little bit low, as they did use a Maledict on him. Is Asgroth going to be able to keep him up? That really is the question. Temporal Shield should be able to deflect for a little bit longer, but outside of these swaps onto Drainer, the consistent pressure from ABC really hasn't been there. But I do like what they're doing. Drainer trinketed out of a blind a little bit earlier on. Nixie committing Vanish, trying to get him low. Actually, I think he used a re-stealth with his Night Elf Racial, so he's able to get the Garrote Silence on Drainer to continue the chain. And as a response Drainer, he's going to be using not only his Way of the Crane, but also his Life Cocoon. So committing a few defensive cooldowns there in order to survive that swap coming in from ABC. So I like the strategy from ABC. We just need to see them consistently looking for these swaps onto Drainer.
This is the first time we've seen the Pumpers in a tournament, and they've been doing a great job so far, but still their Gladiators Maledict's coordination is very lackluster. In an earlier attempt, if they had just pulled the trigger, coordinated all 3 together, I almost guarantee Alec would have had to Ice Block. They initiated with 1, it was dispelled. Then they waited the better part of 4 to 5 seconds to activate the second one. That one had to be healed through, and then they just didn't use the third one. Gladiators Maledict, especially with the way the current meta is best used one after the other in sync to deny as much healing as you can to force a powerful cooldown like an Ice Block. Now they're trying to go after Nixie behind the pillar with that Ring of Frost, but again, only 1 Gladiator's Maledict was used there. Asgroth just dispels it and then immediately heals the target back up. The only advantage I can see by splitting the Maledicts up is that you maybe run the other healer out of mana because they have to use Dispel more frequently, and Dispel is not exactly a low-cost spell for a healer. That's really the only thing, but I feel like against these mages when you're playing it with a Way of the Crane Monk is that you just use 3 Maledicts to get an Ice Block, 3 Maledicts to get an Ice Block, and then 3 Maledicts to get a kill. And if you can do that, it sounds really simple for me to explain. If you can do that, you're going to win the game very easily. So I really want to see the Pumpers just wait, let all 3 of their Gladiators Maledicts come back off cooldown because they're out of sync right now, and go for big wave pushes.
I think it's smart, especially if you can get Iron Bark out of the way, Temporal Shield out of the way, then it's almost a guarantee. The one thing Alec has available is he is playing the Dark Iron Dwarf, so he has that Fire Blood Racial if he really needs to, and we've seen people opt into that to remove the Gladiator's Maledict, as it is a magic debuff that can free him up from some of that healing reduction available. It's a good Racial, especially in this particular meta. Nerd Rage forced into the Die by the Sword as well. That was the Life Cocoon, so some good pressure. Nixie getting swapped to, though. Gladiator Safeguard procs. He's in execute range. Can they take him down? He gets chopped up by Nerd Rage and Cervantes, and that Rogue's just such a vulnerable target in this matchup. If they can make those swaps, the Pumpers really bringing it to him in game 1.
So here's the thing as well. When you do look at this composition, Sid was obviously critical of different things like trinket usage and things like that. when you have a comp that strong, you can afford certain mistakes. That's one of the reasons that we say these compositions are so strong right now. And when they do play it at such a good level mechanically, even if the trinkets maybe aren't completely synced, they're still going to be able to find pressure, and the Rogue is going to be that target this time around. Zico, what did you think of the trinket usage?
Well, I think it depends really. In certain situations, you have CC on the healer, then you can just shove them. In certain situations, if the spell is on cooldown, you can kind of use that Maledict. It is situational, but overall, we do like to see them stacked up. It really just depends. And I think this moment right here is just, honestly, Nixie, he trinketed out of a fear, I believe, and he just gets immediately punished on that. Asgraf was actually sneaking away for a drink, and that's what we like to see from the pumpers. When a Resto Druid team is going for those drinks, immediately the team pops all of their cooldown on a member, forcing him to come back and lose out on the mana value that he would get from the drink, or just open up a potential kill here. This was, of course, a mistake on Nixie's end as well. I'm not really sure. What did he trinket there? Was it an intimidating shot? I'm not sure. He had his trinket at the start of that clip, and I don't know. Maybe he misclicked. I'm not sure. I didn't.
You might have trinketed the Stormbolt into a leg sweep, maybe.
The leg sweep was full, though.
Oh, I don't know.
I didn't catch it.
Me neither.
Might be an error on my end. Either way, Nixie's trinket usage there probably wasn't ideal. And Asgraf, of course, was behind the pillar. He had to run all the way around. Draenor activating that Way of the Crane as well to punish that mistake, as he had the mana lead when Asgraf was out of mana to really force him to stop drinking. I like that.
Now we're going to be headed to Dalaran Sewers. This is a nice small map if you are the pumpers, but this is a map that ABC did pick. So what do you think ABC is trying to do here with this map selection, Zico?
Ooh, it's a tough one to call. I mean, they could run the same thing and potentially just try to kill Draenor more.
I don't like this.
I don't like this map either, but I think that's their strategy here. It's either that or potentially the Rogue Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this kind of idea of just, okay, if I pick this map, I know exactly what my opponent is going to be doing, and we get rid of one of those maps when we are on our pick. It's something that we've seen a lot of the teams do. I feel like we have been critical of it a whole bunch here, but the nice thing, I think one of the things that's undeniably nice about this for ABC is they're assuming they know exactly what the pumpers are going to do on this map, which means that they can have that plan, and it's going to go to script most likely.
That's true, but the pumpers, they got to be feeling comfortable locking in that composition. I don't know what ABC exactly
that's the
has.
downside.
Yeah, you lock in Dalaran Sewers. That's normally a really good map for a Death Knight. You're always in range to get Death Grip. It's really difficult to run away. They can keep you in combat easily with Death and Decay. And yeah, I don't know. The pumpers are really taking their time here, which is a little surprising to me, but ultimately we'll lock in the same composition, and this is what makes the pumpers so dangerous.
They're one of those teams that we do expect to take their full time locking it in. That's something that we see quite a bit. But ultimately, they have a plan. And, you know, when you try to weigh out the pros and the cons, it seems like the cons of ABC's strategy really do outweigh the pros, because the pumpers do get to do exactly their plan. Yes, you know that they're going to do it, but it's because it's a line of play that they do want to go for. And now we're going to see an Ellie Mage. Sid, what do you think?
That's their best comp into the pumpers, period, I think. We already seen what happened to Omnivore against Elite Frost Mage. You don't move. So you just take Nerd Rage out of the equation. He's no longer even a possible player. Then you have to be able to beat the Boomkin Death Knight Mistweaver. That's what they should be more afraid of, and that's why I think the pumpers didn't lock in right away. They were measuring what's more likely to win, our Warrior into the Ellie Mage or our Boomkin into Rogue Mage. But because the pumpers got the blind pick win, they can now dictate the pace of the match. ABC have given them a good setting for the Warrior to potentially win, even though they're compositionally disadvantaged. I don't like what ABC have done by going for Dalaran. Would have made way more sense to go to, if you really wanted to, a neutral map like Tiger's Peak, but it would have been the most sense to go to Tolvaron or Ashamanes. I think the pumpers have the rest of the series off the back of that blind pick.
Okay, so you bring up Omnivore, right? Omnivore gets completely locked down. Like, Omnivore, if he had a pedometer on, I don't even think it would have registered the steps that he took on that hook point matchup in particular. Blackrook Hold is another one where he really just did not get to do anything. Nerd Rage is one of the best main warriors that I think we really do have in the world. I mean, obviously you talk about Blizzo as well, but Nerd Rage is one of these guys that this is what he plays. This is all that he plays. Is he going to be able to navigate through a situation like this any better, or is that just the nature of being a warrior?
Well, what I think when we saw the matchup earlier with Omnivore, he was playing with a mage. So it's a little bit different in that sense, because you can easily sort of keep one warrior snared up. It's difficult for him to get to you. Use all your crowd control on him. Every time he charges, he gets knocked away, he's constantly getting rooted and Nova'd. But when you have a Death Knight on your team, it's a little bit different. All of a sudden, they have to worry about 2 melee targets. Cervantes can help him out with the Death Grip as well as some of the range stuns. So I think it's not as easy for Alec, and I think Nerd Rage will have more uptime in this matchup. In addition to that, I think Drainer, if he really wants to, he can go for the honor, or he can go for the talent Tiger's Lust, so he can help him out by getting him out of some roots and giving him that additional snare, or sorry, that root break in addition to speed with Tiger's Lust if he really needs to. And we've seen Drainer before use Ring of Peace really well, so we can use Ring of Peace as another tool to allow Nerd Rage to get uptime. So I think the Pumpers have a lot more tools available to them to enable Nerd Rage to actually get off some damage.
Yeah, it just seems like this composition, Zico, altogether is strong. You have ROP, you have grip, you have all these things to make sure that that uptime will be a lot better than some of the other compositions that we have seen. Let's take it a step further, though. Also, Drainer's going to be able to put out a decent amount of pressure as well, most likely. Do you expect that we see a talent choice from him come into play?
Yeah, I think we'll maybe see a late game. Actually, no way of the crane on Drainer.
Interesting.
But
never mind.
I think the interesting thing is Asgarath has to go for drinks, and Dalaran Sewers is not a great map for drinks. In addition to that, Nerd Rage is going to be doing most of his damage with deep wounds as well. So I don't think this is going to be too bad for him. As long as he just tries to keep hitting people with Mortal Strike, he will get out at least 50 or 60% of his total damage just from that.
The Pumpers are gifted a map that allows them to play the strategy that we know them for, the strategy that gave them their name, the Pumpers. They're going to try to use Dalaran Sewers against ABC, who locked it in, and get themselves on match point.
Yeah, I think it was smart. It's definitely the high percentage play on the Pumpers' part. If they had locked in that balanced Druid Fnobbers, they would have gotten Rogue Maged, and we saw how well that went for them earlier on in the tournament. So I think that taking at least the map advantage, even though you don't want to be a warrior against this composition, it's definitely a more smart play. However, their Maledict usage needs to be more precise if they're going to take down this composition. They need to do all-out coordinated attacks towards the Mage or Jamie, using those Maledict trinkets one by one with a little bit of crowd control onto the healer Asgaroth, and if they can execute on that 3 times in a row, I definitely think they can take this.
Yeah, I think so too. Drainer still doing quite well in terms of mana, and he actually is playing Tiger's Lust, so he will be able to free up Nerd Rage a little bit with that ability. Anytime he uses it, Nerd Rage will be able to break out of a root and also get a little bit of a sprint. And if he can maintain high uptime on Alec, I think it's going to be dangerous for Alec. And as well, the build that Alec's playing, where he doesn't have his pet, and he doesn't have Ice Nova because he's playing Lonely Winter, he loses out on a lot of those roots available to him. So Nerd Rage isn't going to be snared up and stuck in one spot nearly as often with the build Alex is playing. The trade-off is that Alec, of course, is going to be able to put out a little bit more instant damage in this matchup. But with the split strategy, I think Alec it could theoretically actually get casted damage off. I don't know if I like the build nearly as much when you have an Elemental Shaman on your team. I feel like you want to be able to be that free casting threat in a Wizard setup like this.
What's interesting here by the Pumpers is that they're sending Cervantes to attack Jamie. They're sending Nerd Rage to attack Alec. So you would typically see a melee cleave have both members attacking the same player, but when facing a Wizard cleave, so 2 ranged classes, if you split up your melee, you've got disruption on both places, and neither Wizard can completely free cast and generate counter pressure, and it can be a way to attrition the Wizard cleave down in a long extended match. And this is where experience comes into play for the Pumpers. They've been playing melee cleaves for so long that they can bounce between some of the more typical strategies and atypical strategies like this, the split DPS strat, where your main goal isn't necessarily to kill the target, it's just to make them have the least amount of fun.
Yep, and if you're a player at home and you play Mistweaver Monk, normally mages are very difficult for Mistweaver Monks, but there are small tricks you can do. I kind of talked about it in the last game. You'll see Drainer, if he gets interrupted or he needs to heal up his team, he'll run into Alex Blizzard and his Frozen Orb. That makes him basically immune to Polymorph. He can get Polymorph, but it'll break immediately, and it's essentially a waste from Alec, and Drainer will be able to get some cast off, especially with the Thunder Focus T, if he has that. So definitely a good strategy adaptation, and if you're a new player at home, it's something you definitely want to look out for. Once your Polymorph breaks or once you top off your team, you can easily just Transcendence away to safety once again.
Another advantage of this split DPS strategy is that a Frost Mage brings in a lot of area of effect snares, but if you only send one person after him, he's only snaring one target. And same for Jamie, he has Thunderstorm, so this is an area-wide knockback effect. But if only one member is next to the target that he wants to knock back, the other one is still having uptime. So by splitting their resources into 2 different places, they can maximize their uptime, their damage output, and their disruption. It's definitely a good decision on their part, utilizing the map and this strategy to try and pressure the team. And if you're ABC, you don't want to stack up, because then you'll both get cleaved down by the Death Knight and the Warrior, and it becomes a bit of a game of chicken, because then when the Warrior and Death Knight are stacked up, they get cleaved by the Frozen Orb. But I think the Warrior and Death Knight do more damage in close quarters, so Alec needs to do a better job of staying away from Jamie and not stacking up as they just did a moment ago, because it did tax quite a bit of Asgrath's mana. Drainer then, as the healer for the team, has to decide when to make pushes like this, activating the Way of the Crane, boosting his damage and allowing that damage to heal, but more importantly boosting his damage so they can push for a kill. And I would like to see this be the time where they use their Gladiator's Maledicts when they have increased damage from Way of the Crane, as it's more likely to create panic for the team of ABC, and panic will then lead to mistakes. Mistakes will then lead to openings later on in the match. But so far, the Pumpers' coordination has definitely been a weak point for their team overall, and that push right there was definitely lackluster.
Yeah, it could have been executed a little bit better, and we just want to see that done by them in order for them to actually secure a kill a little bit earlier on. But the Pumpers have managed to hold on. They've been limiting a lot of the damage that ABC has been able to do, but ABC has been in no real danger in this matchup. I can't help but feel that they're looking to play for a long game, but also at the same time allowing Asgrath to just go and drink whenever he wants. He's just been going for these restalls, resetting his mana by sitting down and drinking, and the Pumpers have made basically no effort whatsoever in trying to shut that down.
Nice play by Cervantes, death gripping Jamie behind the box, out of line of sight as Asgrath was making a crowd control push, trying to catch Jamie off guard. Nerd Rage then collided with Cervantes on that play, and that's really what we need to see from the Pumpers, is when they decide to mix up their strategy. They obviously want to focus on splits, disruption, but if they can collide on the same target with good opportunities, that's when they can execute for kills. That's usually when we want to see Drainer also participate in the fight, adding some extra damage with the Way of the Crane. A death grip like that later in the match, deeper into dampening, could definitely net a kill for the Pumpers, but still, I want to see that Gladiator's Maledict coordination. I really haven't seen any usage of it in this match in particular, definitely not noticeable, and that trinket is supposed to be their win condition. So with Way of the Crane, Drainer runs into Frozen Orb. He's immune to its snare, and Frozen Orb will also break Polymorph. Now he paralyses Asgrath, knocks him down out of line of sight. This is where they should be going for the Maledict play. They should be going for 1, 2, 3. 1, dispel, 2, heal through it, 3, and then find a kill. And they only went for 1 Maledict and then nothing after it.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. Stun now onto Asgrath. He uses the Iron Bark on Jamie. Jamie's just such a slippery target. The Elemental Shaman has a lot of mobility in Ghost Wolf. It basically suppresses all of your snares. Nerd Rage getting bursted down lower, has to activate the Die by the Sword, leaps behind the pillar. Drainer with no life cocoon has to channel out some heals in order to keep him alive. Actually, he uses the Revival. I feel like he could have held on to that a little bit longer. Potentially, maybe he wanted to dispel Cervantes out of something, but that's a big cooldown to heal up Nerd Rage when he had an opportunity to essentially free cast.
All right, Nerd Rage trading powerful defensive cooldowns. He's going to be a weak point for the team compositionally. They've been trying to overcome that disadvantage with target selection and strategy, but overall their execution is just not there. We do see both members collide on Alec. Nice Ring of Peace from Drainer. That definitely could be a win condition on the Dalaran sewers, knocking Alec out of position, but he's able to restabilize by blinking back to Asgrath's side and connect a couple of heals. We have seen frequent usage of Lightning Lasso onto Cervantes, and I think the main reason for that is that Cervantes has multiple ranged forms of stops, so he's more likely to be able to interrupt Lightning Lasso, whereas Nerd Rage, you would like the Lightning Lasso damage on the Warrior because he's not going to Death Strike it back, but if you get interrupted instantly, you just get no damage. So maybe Jamie's just trying to calculate maximum damage output. He's never going to get a kill with that way of thinking, but maybe in dampening he can. I still would much rather see him Hex Cervantes. That way you can remove the Mind Freeze and then go for a Lightning Lasso on the Warrior. That's a bit more of a typical strategy on Elemental Shaman. And the thing is Hex is threatening that chain, so if the Death Knight uses the interrupt on Hex, then you just wait for the interrupt to fade and then you get it guaranteed. I think that would be a much better choice. I mean, imagine if there was a Lightning Lasso on Nerd Rage right now, instead going after Drainer with it, and he gets stopped on it. Jamie is definitely playing a bit lazy, I think, on Elemental Shaman in this match.
Alec with his Temporal Shield looking to deflect this attack, should be able to do it. And this is an opportunity for the Pumpers. They got Iron Bark and Temporal Shield. This is when we want to see the push with the Gladiator's Maledicts in order to take Alec down. They don't have anything to reduce the incoming damage or prevent the incoming damage, and I think they would be able to overwhelm Alec in the situation if they had those trinkets available. Alec still getting low. Drainer caught into the Polymorph as all three members looking to take down Alec. Asgarth having to use a lot of mana. This could be the first ice block. Alec still trying to kite away the best he can. Jamie looking to help with some peels. Drainer keeps Nerd Rage in the fight with the Life Cocoon as they push in and try to force out this first ice block. And Alec, running out of mobility, really didn't have much he could do. And that is the checklist the Pumpers need to be finding. Iron Bark, Temporal Shield. Once those are gone, that's when you push. That's when a mage is vulnerable, and you can actually start forcing out these ice blocks.
But now it will be counter-aggression from ABC as Stormkeeper is channeled. Lightning bolts are flying in. Drainer timing some big heals. Thunderstorm on the anti-magic zone, but unfortunately Nerd Rage able to immediately charge right back into its defense and on target. We see Frozen Orb currently down here for Alec. He wants to generate pressure. Nerd Rage uses Spell Reflect. This denies Ice Lance, which is boosted damage during Frozen Orb, so good defense on Nerd Rage. Ducking around the corner, waiting for that to then fade, then charging back into the battle. Definitely top-level warrior play in terms of knowing when to bounce between both defense and offense. Alec looking to get crowd control, gets denied by Nerd Rage again with that War Banner. Nerd Rage definitely doing a great job. Cervantes, though, is starting to lose the 1v1 against Jamie. Now instead trying to collide on Alec along with Drainer. This is the way of the crane push. This is where they need to coordinate their Maledicts.
Gonna get it.
They don't even need to. The damage is too high. Second ice block has been forced, and the Pumpers are in the driver's seat.
The Pumpers, they know their win condition. Once again, we see Drainer with the way of the crane. When Iron Bark's down, when Temporal Shield's down, ABC, they have to try to hold on to those defensives as long as they can, because if they're just throwing them out all willy-nilly, then it's just so easy for the Pumpers to make that offensive push. Jamie getting a little bit low, and as we move to 30% dampening, it really feels like most of the pressure's in the Pumpers' favor. Drainer had to trinket and use Life Cocoon and die by the sword, so now all of a sudden things are looking good for ABC. So many defensive cooldowns forced out basically instantaneously on the Pumpers.
All right, that Lightning Lasso might net a kill here. Maledict flies in, dispelled. Where's the second? A bit of miscommunication there with the Maledicts on ABC's part as well. Definitely not the highest level of usage of it. That's a big deal. That trinket is definitely a kill window for any team in the tournament. Hex secured onto Drainer. Frozen Orb dropped. Let's see how Nerd Rage decides to deal with this. Is he going to be able to? I think Cervantes might have actually Dark Simulacrum to Frozen Orb.
I think so.
He's just putting it down. But now Nerd Rage is in trouble. He's got nowhere to run. Kited Nerd Rage into the perfect position. That was really well done from ABC, dragging him out into the open corner, away from the boxes. He responded too late. They were miscoordinated there. They got ahead of themselves, thinking that they could get a kill. Went for a push and got counter-aggressed. Thanks to ABC's good positioning, they were able to execute Nerd Rage.
And also, taking a step further, look at what map this was on. This could be very important for the rest of the series.
Yeah, they managed to take away Dalaran from the Pumpers, which is of course going to be very nice for them for the rest of the series. If they can make, the next pick on Blackrock hold, then they only will really have a hook point to go to when it's the Pumpers map pick, and then maybe they can win this matchup as the Rogue Mage, having a smaller map to work with. Now, at the end of this one, we can see here Alec actually dragging them out in the corner, the Frozen Orb build being very effective, and Drainer had to trinket that Hex from Jamie earlier on. Nice Cyclone and Vortex there from Asgarath, and that Ray of Frost. As easy as 1, 2, 3, they take him down.
Might not be as easy as 1, 2, 3. We might need to see them take it might be like a 2, 4, 5 type situation here. I'm kind of curious how ABC actually does take this when Pumpers are going to have so many. They have the momentum right now, right? Like, they can switch up so many different things. We're going to find out very shortly who's going to take that come into play yet, but we know that that is something that is just waiting there. It is that extra X factor with that balanced Druid. Whether or not we will see it, we will find out as we move through this series. We're all tied up. Blade's Edge. Game number 3, which we do like to call here the swing matchup because it can determine which way the momentum does go. Does it switch back into the team that didn't win the blind pick, or does it stay with the team that took that first game? ABC versus the Pumpers, game 3, gates open.
Yeah, we'll have to see what exactly ABC can get done in this matchup. It seemed like their best opportunity, and again, game number 1 in a Grand Arena was going after Drainer, but immediately Alec actually finding a polymorph on Drainer, sneaking it in. Nerd Rage just going to be line of sighting with his Blade Storm now. Big swap over onto Drainer. Immediate counter stun by Cervantes, though. I think we'll keep Drainer alive, buy him enough time to throw out that Life Cocoon. Now, we've been seeing Mistweaver Monks, they just are not afraid of using that Life Cocoon as soon as possible. It's very efficient healing in terms of mana. It's also a really short cooldown, so it's not that scary to throw it out. Drainer's going to have that back up in around 40 seconds.
All right, Asgaroth in the back line. Tommy a ton of heals with his Innervate. Really effective use of Innervate there, making all of his expensive healing free. That allows him to stay at top mana throughout this initial attack against the Pumpers. Now, ABC's main strategy against this composition has been to kill the Mistweaver Monk, so Drainer. On Blade's Edge Arena, this is why Drainer's team picked it. It's probably one of the more difficult maps to kill a Mistweaver because they can jump down off the bridge and then use Transcendence Portal back up. So Drainer moves in with Way of the Crane. They stun lock him and try and kill him. They held on to Asphyxiate to stun Nixie while Drainer was stunned, limiting the amount of damage, allowing Drainer more time to spend in the midfield. We see Maledict activated here onto Alex. Second Maledict, much better coordination in that position here by the Pumpers, but the temporal shield of Alec was perfectly timed and likely to soak up tons of that hits, but even still, a lot more momentum now that the Pumpers are coordinating better.
Yeah, I think it was smart. I think they got the Fire Blood racial from Alec there as well, so we won't have that available for the next time they have the Maledicts up, I believe. We'll have to see what can happen.
Ooh.
Drainer, I think, was going for a drink and actually got sapped. Nicely done by Nixie, but he commits his Vanish to do so. So one of his defensives now gone, and really they weren't able to get much done. I mean, it looks fancy to go Vanish off, get a sap, but when you have no damage to follow it up, it's essentially a wasted cooldown. Drainer's going to be able to portal back up quite easily. Cervantes, Nerd Rage, they literally took 0 damage during that crowd control chain, and now Alec is the one that is in a little bit of trouble.
All right, so Way of the Crane is available. Waiting to see when Drainer tries to push in for that. I can imagine that Nixie is holding Kidney Shot to switch targets. So if Drainer just sits back and chills, doesn't really do anything, Nixie will sit on his Kidney Shot for an extended period of time, which means that Cervantes and Nerd Rage get more uptime. I actually think Drainer should just relax, take a break at the top of the bridge. You know, now they've committed the Kidney Shot. Icebound Fortitude traded for that. I guess Drainer was looking for a drink and resetting his mana pool. You do want to make trades when necessary for that, but Icebound Fortitude is typically needed to answer Smoke Bomb. I guess Nix actually isn't running that Smoke Bomb, instead maybe running Flying Daggers to maximize his damage, so that play from Cervantes is not going to be able to be punished due to the build that Nixie is running. Asgrath currently crowd controlled, but with preemptive activation of Iron Bark, Alec can tank all of this damage quite easily. Drainer using that Way of the Crane, but getting Kidney Shot on it. I don't believe they're going to have enough damage to take him down. It's just really unlikely, especially when you're by yourself as the Assassination Rogue in the current meta. You're not going to find a kill on a healer by yourself that easily. So instead, going for Cyclones and crowd controlling the Way of the Crane is just a better answer to remove damage and healing from the fight. They switch their attention to Nerd Rage, and they manage to at least pull Life Cocoon from that attack. So really nice mid-match adaptation on ABC's part. I really like their target bouncing, but they are starting to fall behind. Cervantes has stolen a Polymorph, now securing that onto Asgaroth, trying to develop some pressure on Alec, but not finding any damage off of it. Drainer manages to make an escape. I still really like the map pick from the Pumpers. This was definitely a smart decision on their part, realizing that ABC was going after Drainer in Game 1. They remembered that moving into Game 3 and picked the best map for Drainer to be able to survive.
Yeah, and Drainer has been using the map quite effectively so far as he moves in, getting a double leg sweep onto Nixie and Alec. Do they have the damage to take Alec down? Asgaroth still has the Iron Bark if he really needs to use it. Anti-Magic Zone gets traded out. A big swap here onto Drainer, but he should be able to easily tank through this damage with Anti-Magic Zone, with the Fortifying Brew. Those defensive cooldowns can carry him forward and keep him alive.
All right, at this point, no real significant lead for either side. Perhaps ABC have some opportunity to kill Cervantes, but before dampening, I don't think so. Instead, going after Nerd Rage with Blind on Drainer. No damage, though, and Drainer is deciding to sit through this. We would typically see a healer use his Gladiator's Medallion to break out of Blind, but Drainer's just read the situation, said, you're not committing any damage. I'm not giving you my Gladiator's Medallion. Now, the Pumpers look to reverse the damage, getting crowd control of their own onto Asgaroth, chasing down Alec. Alec downstairs, but all three members connecting here shortly. Drainer with that Way of the Crane might be the X factor. That push right there, I would have maybe liked to have seen some Gladiator Maledict usage on their part. Might not have been available. Double stun secured by Drainer. He might be moving for Paralysis. There's Paralysis. Typical crowd control combo by Drainer. But now Drainer caught out in the open. He's going to have to relay that Transcendence or look to try and escape. With that Frozen Orb down, Alec's damage is boosted quite high. Drainer gets Ursul's Vortex back into it. Good placement by Asgarath. Pressure still mounting, but Alec is forced to somewhat retreat away. Fortunately, Drainer actually just jumps down back in line of sight, tries to use the corner to line inside him. I would have liked to maybe have seen Drainer just stay up top. He's setting himself up to use the Transcendence portal to escape, but I don't think jumping down was a necessity there. Asgarath has managed to sneak away. He's regenerating mana, so instead of trying to stop that drink, they go for a kill, and they manage to bank an evasion. So you basically have two choices when the enemy team's healer starts to drink, is either to find him and stop it, or to just push for a kill on another target that is really far away. And in that position, they at least managed to pull evasion from Nixie, so he's got to keep aware of that, because they could switch back to him later on. Asgarath won't have as much room to breathe. Drainer securing another double stun, tons of damage. Nixie in trouble. I really like what the Pumpers are doing strategically here. They're definitely looking like a strong team for the whole tournament.
Yeah, they got Nixie's Safeguard trinket as well earlier on, so he doesn't have that to rely on. Now with no Vanish, no Evasion, no Cloak of Shadows, no nothing, Nixie is increasingly vulnerable. A stun onto Asgarath. Nixie's still in execute range. They might be able to take him down. Drainer and Cervantes close it out. Intimidating shout going in from Nerd Rage onto Asgarath, and that's all the crowd control that they needed. These consistent swaps onto Nixie will bank them a win.
That's why we call the Pumpers the Pumpers. They're going to be able to do it on the close quarter map. This is one of the things that is really interesting, though, about the fact that Dalaran Sewers does pan out the way that it does. Do you think that it is an anomaly that we went to a small map and we didn't see the Pumpers able to grab the win?
It might be necessary because of the game on Nagrand Arena. It looked way closer than this game, honestly. And Asgarath went for the drink on the small map. We saw the Pumpers immediately swap over to Nixie, pull out that evasion as a result from that opportunity that they had. And then again, in the end, they just managed to land a nice crowd control with that intimidating shout, and Nixie doesn't have that defense anymore. Because of the small map being so punishing, we see Asgarath trinketing that leg sweep in a moment, I believe. Yep, there it is, leg sweep, trinkets it, and then of course we can see Nixie making a nice getaway here with the Iron Bark as well. But due to the map being so small, we know that Nerd Rage and Cervantes, they are going to have a lot of uptime. And here I wanted to see Alec cast out these polymorphs. He's doing a good job with it right here, but he needed to get a few more, but the positioning of the map doesn't allow it. Again, Nerd Rage coming in with that nice fear there, and that's all you really need. You force out the trinket of Asgarath, you force out the evasion of Nixie earlier on, then you can get that intimidating shout and then just ride that momentum and actually take him down. A little bit poor positioning there as well on the end of that one, kind of using that small little pillar at the top of the bridge there, on the ramp, to line of sight Alec, actually basically negating his whole class. Otherwise he could have re-sheeped Cervantes on the Dispel, or potentially even sheeped Nerd Rage there and maybe saved Nixie.
Is this a matchup that just completely revolves around swap opportunities? We talk about how the Rogue isn't going to be the primary target. It's a target that when you see the opening, you're going to have to go onto it. Is this all going to revolve around those swaps?
Well, what it comes down to is you sit on the mage and you get the temporal shield, you get the Iron Bark out of the way, and then you go ahead and combo your Maledicts. You have a lot of uptime because of the map being so small, but whenever Asgarath goes for the drink, the mage is usually in a safe spot where he has his blinks ready, he might have a Nova, and he might have a lot of healing over time effects. That's when you just Nixie time, you swap over to him, you get a Stormbolt, you get a leg sweep, anything like that, and then he doesn't have any healing over time effects. That's going to force out his personal cooldowns like the evasion, and then you manage to do that one more time, or just capitalize on that he doesn't have them, and you win the game.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sid said to keep your eyes on when we were going into that game as well. Those stuns really going to be one of the things that telegraph, okay, a go is going to happen onto the Rogue as of right now. So when we do get into the next matchup, do you think we kind of see more of the same? Is that going to be what we need to pay attention to? Is that where the potential kills are going to come from, or are we going to kind of dial it back and maybe even see some different comps?
Oh, I feel like we're going to be going to some different comps or seeing some different comps. I think if the Pumpers once again lock in the TSG setup, so the same comp we just saw from them, I think ABC once again, they're going to make a switch to that Elemental Shaman Frost Mage Restoration Druid. I think that's a really good matchup for them, depending on the map. It was a close call. I feel like Alec was close to going down in that last matchup. If the Pumpers decide to switch it up and go for the other comp we've seen them run, which is bring in Fnobbers,
it's not.
I don't think they're going to do it just because I feel like
it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
The reason they don't want to do that is because ABC is going to be able to punish that Balance Druid quite a bit. Keep him in bear form, and I just feel like the Pumpers won't have much of a chance.
The only change that the Pumpers should think about is maybe Resto Druid instead of Mistweaver. But even then, I think they can win with Mistweaver. They just need to be coordinated. If they stop being out of sync and actually go for those big pushes onto the Mage, even against the Ellie Mage, I think they can still win. Sure, they're disadvantaged, but they were really close to winning on Dalaran, and things just slipped away from cooldown overlaps, a little bit out of position. So I think overall their best composition is the Mistweaver Arms Warrior to blind lock, and then ABC, of course, go Ellie Mage, and the Pumpers just have to play better.
Yeah, so you say no Moonkin here, that you don't expect the Moonkin here because you can easily punish that chicken. How do you do that?
Well, you lock in Rogue Mage. We already saw it play out yesterday, and I can imagine Fnaubers doesn't want to go into that fight. They basically did no damage. Fnaubers was in bear form the entire game and then died.
Yeah, you can just choke out everything that he would be able to do, completely shut him down. So the Pumpers know that on the blind they need to lock in this composition. If we ever do see the balance Druid, we expect that to be coming in when they have the compositional advantage that ABC has right now.
Yeah, and once again, we're going to see the Frost Mage and the Elemental and Resto Druid. I like that they picked Tiger's Peak here just because the map takeaway is just not significant enough with the additional maps in Battle for Azeroth, and with the fact that people are now comfortable actually picking Blade's Edge, because that's something we didn't really see in Legion. People were kind of, they didn't really want to pick Blade's Edge as it was being reworked prior to that. So now people have gotten a chance to kind of learn how the map works and what comps are good on it. People are more used to actually locking that in. So you have Blade's Edge, you have Hook Point, you have Blackrook Hold as well. So even if you take Dalaran away, even if you take one of the smaller maps away, the Pumpers are still going to have all they need is 2 small maps, and there's plenty of that, so they don't need to do that. I like this map pick a lot more. It's more of a standard map. You don't need a super wide map as well. You already have a really good matchup here. ABC should be able to take this one, and then the Pumpers presumably are going to be locking in a small map after that.
Map pool's definitely evolved, and it's something that we've talked about quite a bit. I feel like the only map that we really don't see is Mugambala. We've seen it before, but for the most part, we don't really see Mugambala. And I feel like before Mugambala even did exist in the map pool, there were maps that you kind of didn't see. Mugambala, though, is that map now. Yeah,
Mugambala definitely not utilized by a lot of teams, but I feel like that is to the detriment of some of these teams. I really feel like they could implement certain strategies, like if they focused on making that map an advantage for them. A lot of teams aren't used to it because there's lots of different areas on the map, and you can implement different strategies to sort of exploit the map. And if teams really focused on trying to learn that, add up strategies and compositions that they can run, potentially that could give them an advantage, but we really haven't seen many teams go for that just yet.
It's such an interesting map. It does seem like because of all the reasons that some teams would avoid it, it seems like that's the reasons why, as a team, you might want to focus on it and actually try to use it, because you could really throw teams off guard. I mean, Sid and I talk about it all the time. It's like having a bunch of different maps thrown together. There are so many different areas that are so well defined. It goes even a step further than just thinking about the room, for example, on Blackrook Hold and how that is going to come into play. So maybe we see some more Mugambala in the future. I don't really think it's going to be this season even. I don't even really think we'll see it too much before we get to LAN. Maybe when we get to LAN, some people try to throw people off of that map, but I feel like it might take some time before players do start to use that, Sid.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a good map for Mistweavers and Warlocks that run the Demonic Circle, but Destruction Warlock being the meta and they're not running Demonic Circle, you can actually benefit a lot from just the Z-axis going up and down. You can also teleport from the starting area all the way back to the